The hearing room smelled like old wood and fresh fear. 3 federal commissioners sat behind a raised mahogany bench, their faces carved from the same institutional stone that lined the walls. Press filled the gallery, notebooks open, cameras positioned. At the defense table, Victoria Ashford occupied her chair the way people occupy thrones, a $4,000 charcoal suit fitted to her frame, 4 attorneys flanking her like columns of a temple built on money. She did not look nervous. She looked like a woman who had never lost anything she wasn't willing to throw away. At the plaintiff's table sat a black man in a borrowed suit. The jacket pulled slightly at the shoulders. The tie was knotted with military precision, but the fabric was department store thin. No attorney beside him, no team behind him, just a single folder, or thick enough to change the architecture of a room, resting under hands that did not tremble. Commissioner Aldridge adjusted his glasses and leaned into the microphone. "Mr. Cole, you're alleging systematic housing discrimination affecting 73 families across 6 years. That's a substantial claim for a man listed in company records as a custodial technician." The gallery murmured. Victoria's lead attorney smirked without moving his lips. Marcus Cole opened the folder. His voice carried the weight of something rehearsed not for performance but for precision. Every syllable chosen the way a surgeon chooses where to cut. "Commissioner, I'm not just a janitor. I'm a licensed housing inspector, credential number HI20194471, certified by the state of New Jersey. And what I found inside those buildings isn't an allegation. It's 247 pages of evidence that Ashford Property Group has been operating a 2-tier maintenance system based on the race of its tenants for over 3 decades. Victoria Ashford's face lost something it had never lost in a boardroom: color. Her lead attorney grabbed her arm, whispering with the frantic energy of a man watching a building collapse from the inside. The gallery erupted into the kind of noise that gavels are invented to silence. But how does a janitor build a federal case against a $340 million company? How does a man with $47 in his checking account dismantle a machine designed to be invisible? 3 months earlier, the answer was mopping floors at midnight. Marcus Cole came home at 5:47 on a Tuesday morning. "I'm still wearing the navy blue uniform of Ashford Property Group's custodial staff." The name patch read Marcus in block letters, stitched above a logo he'd learned to hate the way you hate a clock that won't stop ticking. Unit 4B was quiet. He set his keys on the counter beside a stack of bills arranged not by urgency, but by which ones would end his life fastest if ignored. The rent notice sat on the refrigerator door, held by a magnet shaped like a planet. $862, due in 6 days. He checked his phone. Bank balance, $47.23. He put the phone face down and moved through the apartment the way a man moves through water. Slowly, deliberately, as though speed might disturb something fragile. The kitchen table held a papier-mâché volcano, still drying, painted in the precise reds and oranges of a child who believed accuracy mattered even in art. To beside it, a handwritten label in careful 7-year-old script, "Mount Vesuvius by Maya Cole, Grade 2. He walked to Maya's room and stood in the doorway. She was asleep with a book about igneous rocks open on her chest, one arm around a stuffed turtle she'd named Professor. On the nightstand, a framed photograph of Denise, smiling in their old garden the summer before the cancer took her, 3 years ago now. Marcus touched the frame the way you touch something sacred. One finger. Brief. Then he pulled Maya's blanket up to her chin and left the room without making a sound. In the kitchen, he made her lunch. Peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, a folded note tucked between them. He wrote the same thing every morning in handwriting small enough to fit on a napkin. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the thing anyway. Love, Daddy. Maya appeared at 8 o'clock, gap-toothed grin first, backpack second, questions third. She was the kind of child who entered rooms like weather, sudden and impossible to ignore. Daddy, the radiator is making that sound again. The banging one. Marcus poured her juice. I know, baby. I put in a maintenance request 11 days ago. Mrs. Patterson upstairs got hers fixed the same day she called. I heard the man come with his tools. Maya tilted her head, and in that tilt lived the kind of question that could topple empires if the right person heard it. Why do they fix her stuff, but not ours? Marcus didn't answer. His jaw tightened around something he couldn't say to a 7-year-old, something about systems and silence and the mathematics of who matters. He walked her to school at 8:15, kissed the top of her head at the gate, watched her disappear into a building that smelled like crayons and industrial cleaner, then drove back to the apartment and fell asleep on the couch for 2 hours and 40 minutes. He dreamed about inspecting buildings. He always dreamed about inspecting buildings. By 10 o'clock that night, Marcus was back inside the Ashford Property Group corporate tower, pushing a mop across marble floors that cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. The executive level was empty except for the hum of servers and the occasional security guard who nodded at Marcus the way people nod at furniture. James Whitfield appeared at 10:40, head of operations, walking through after a late meeting with 2 junior executives trailing him like pilot fish. Whitfield was the kind of man who wore authority the way some men wear cologne, applied too heavily and noticed by everyone in the room. He walked directly through the wet section Marcus had just finished, leaving boot prints across the clean marble without breaking stride. Then he turned back. Hey, you missed a spot over by the elevators, and the conference room trash hasn't been emptied. 3rd time this month I've had to mention it. Marcus kept his grip on the mop handle loose, controlled. I'll get to it, sir. Working through the floor in order. In order. Whitfield smiled at his junior executives, the kind of smile that invites an audience into a private joke. See, this is what I mean about initiative. Some people just don't have the capacity for prioritization. The word capacity hung in the air like smoke, and the junior executives shifted their weight. One of them looked at the floor. Whitfield walked away, his boot prints already drying into the marble like evidence of something no one would report. Marcus said nothing, but his eyes tracked Whitfield's exit with a precision that didn't belong to a man who cleaned floors for a living. There was measurement in that gaze, the kind of seeing that catalogs and files and remembers. He finished the floor and entered the conference room to empty the trash. On the mahogany table, blueprints for a new Ashford development were spread open, weighted down by coffee mugs. Marcus lifted the trash bag, and as he turned, his eyes caught the ventilation specifications on the blueprint's lower right corner. He stopped, set the bag down, leaned closer, his brow furrowed. He stared at the numbers the way a doctor stares at a scan that confirms what he already suspected. Then he straightened, picked up the trash bag, and walked out without a word. But something had shifted behind his eyes, a lock clicking open that no one in that building knew existed. The dispatch office was supposed to be empty at midnight. Rosa Gutierrez was not supposed to be there. But Rosa Gutierrez, 58, maintenance dispatcher for 22 years, had stopped doing what she was supposed to a long time ago. She sat at her desk with the posture of a woman carrying something heavier than paperwork, her computer screen casting blue light across features that hadn't fully relaxed since 2019. Marcus entered to empty her trash can. Rosa didn't look up, but her voice found him anyway, quiet as a confession in an empty church. You see it too, don't you? Marcus set the trash bag down. The computer screen was visible from where he stood. Maintenance request logs, color-coded. Blue tags averaged 2.3-day response times. Orange tags averaged 5.1 days. The blue addresses corresponded to buildings A, C, and E. The orange addresses to buildings B, D, and F. Marcus knew those buildings the way he knew his own pulse. A, C, E housed predominantly white tenants. B, D, F were Black and Latino families. How long? Rosa's hands flattened against the desk. 6 years that I can prove, probably longer. 73 complaints filed by tenants in those buildings. Every single one routed through HR and classified as recurring nuisance. Buried, all of them. She opened her bottom desk drawer. Inside sat a folder thick enough to stop a door. Edges worn soft from years of being touched by hands that didn't know what else to do. 247 pages. I've been keeping records. Dates, names, response times, work order numbers, everything. I just didn't know who to give them to. Her voice cracked on the last word, not from weakness, but from the particular exhaustion of carrying proof of a crime that no one wants prosecuted. Marcus looked at the folder, then at Rosa, then at the screen. 73 families. 6 years. A system calibrated to be invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. He drove home at dawn through streets that looked different now, not because anything had changed, but because he was finally seeing what had always been there. He parked outside Ridgewood Apartments and sat in his car for a full minute, staring at his building. The front railing had been broken for 4 months. He'd reported it twice. Next door, Building A's railing had been replaced last week, gleaming aluminum catching the first light of morning. He looked at his own building, the cracked steps, the buzzer panel dark since August, the hallway light that flickered because maintenance said the wiring was on the schedule. He'd lived inside the evidence for 8 months and called it home. Marcus climbed the stairs to 4B and opened the door quietly. Maya was supposed to be asleep. She was not asleep. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her pajamas, her volcano project pushed aside, a piece of paper clutched in both hands. Her eyes were red. The paper was a note from Maple Creek Elementary, printed on bright yellow cardstock as though cheerfulness could disguise what it actually said. Marcus read it twice, then a third time, because some sentences need to be read 3 times before the body understands what the mind already knows. The thing that waited for him at home was worse than 73 complaints. It was one 7-year-old girl crying at a kitchen table, holding proof that the system he'd just discovered had followed his daughter to school. The note was from Maple Creek Elementary's administration, and it explained in the gentle language institutions use when they're doing something indefensible that students residing in Ridgewood Zone B would be temporarily relocated to portable classrooms due to mold remediation in Building C. Temporarily meant 3 to 4 weeks. Portable meant trailers parked behind the gymnasium where the field used to be. Zone B meant 89% minority enrollment. Zone A students would remain in the main building. The note did not explain why. It didn't need to. The zip code did the explaining. Maya hadn't cried about the trailers. She'd cried about what Tyler Brennan whispered to her during library time, loud enough for 3 other children to hear and quiet enough that no teacher intervened. Tyler told her that kids from her building had to go to the trailers because their houses were dirty and that it was because of people like her. He'd learned the words from somewhere, and wherever that somewhere was, it had taught him that cruelty is inherited like furniture, passed down without anyone remembering who bought it first. Marcus knelt in front of his daughter. His hands on her shoulders were steady, but his pulse was running at a frequency he recognized from nights he'd rather not remember. Listen to me, Maya. You are not less than anyone. Tyler is repeating something somebody taught him, and that somebody was wrong. Our house is not dirty. Our building is not broken because of who we are. It's broken because someone decided we weren't worth fixing. Maya wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Then why don't they fix it? Marcus pulled her into his chest and held her against the beating of something that had just reorganized itself inside him. Every complaint he'd ever filed, every maintenance request ignored, every orange tag on Rosa's screen had been an abstraction until this moment. Now it had a face, 7 years old, gap-toothed, asking questions that deserved answers built from more than words. They're going to fix it, baby. I promise you that. He didn't know yet how he would keep that promise. He only knew that the mathematics of his situation had changed. This was no longer about radiators and response times. This was about what his daughter would believe about herself if the world kept confirming that she was worth 5.1 days, while the girl upstairs was worth 2.3. That same morning, 14 miles away in a glass-walled office that overlooked the river, Victoria Ashford sat at the head of a quarterly operations review and listened to numbers that described a machine she'd inherited and chosen not to dismantle. Tenant satisfaction was up 4% in premium tier buildings. Budget tier properties showed stable occupancy. The diversity report projected on the wall behind her used the phrase "exceeds industry benchmarks" in a font large enough to be read from the hallway. James Whitfield delivered the facility's update with the confidence of a man who had never been questioned about anything that mattered. Zone A properties are tracking ahead of maintenance targets. Zone B is within acceptable parameters. No red flags. A junior analyst named Christine Park raised her hand with the tentativeness of someone who understood the cost of asking questions in rooms that preferred silence. Ms. Ashford, we've received another fair housing complaint from Unit 4B at Ridgewood. That brings the total to 73 from Zone B properties over 6 years. Victoria's pen stopped moving. Wrote it through legal, standard process. Whitfield didn't blink. Already handled. HR flagged it as recurring nuisance, same as the previous 72. The room moved on to capital expenditure projections. Victoria's pen resumed, but Christine Park noticed something no one else caught because no one else was watching. Victoria wrote the number 73 on her notepad and circled it twice before turning the page. After the room emptied, Victoria sat alone. She did not open her father's operations manual. She did not examine her conscience. She picked up the phone and approved a $2 million renovation of the lobby in Building A because the quarterly investor tour was in 3 weeks and appearances, as Gerald Ashford had taught her before she could drive, were the load-bearing walls of any empire. 73 complaints. Standard process. The machine kept running because the people inside it had learned to call maintenance delays scheduling and discrimination prioritization and silence acceptable parameters. But silence, Marcus was learning, had a structure you could map if you knew where to look. The investigation began the following night. Marcus met Rosa at a diner 23 minutes from town, a place where Ashford employees never ate because the coffee was bad and the parking lot had no cameras. Rosa slid the folder across the table the way someone slides a grenade they've been holding with the pin out for 4 years. If they find out I gave you this, I lose my pension. 22 years. Marcus opened the folder. Page 1 was a maintenance dispatch log from 2019. Page 47 was a screenshot of the internal scheduling software with the priority matrix highlighted in yellow. Page 247 was dated 3 days ago. 73 families filed complaints over 6 years, Rosa. Everyone buried. You kept records of all of them. Rosa's coffee sat untouched, going cold. I kept records because I couldn't sleep. Every time I routed an orange tag request to the bottom of the queue because the system told me to, I wrote down what I'd done. Dates, unit numbers, tenant names, response times. I told myself I was building evidence, but the truth is I was building a confession. Marcus closed the folder. What you built is a weapon, and I know how to aim it. Over the next 6 weeks, Marcus divided his life into 2 shifts. The visible one started at 10 each night. Mop floors, empty trash, be invisible. The invisible one started at midnight. Document everything the visible shift let him access. He photographed violations in buildings B, D, and F with the systematic precision of a man who had once inspected 600 buildings for the city of Newark in 4 years. Lid paint in Unit 2C, where 2 children under 6 slept every night. A violation of 42 USC Section 4852D that carried federal penalties. Broken fire escapes in Building D that hadn't been tested since 2018. Black mold in 14 units, concentrations high enough to trigger respiratory distress in children, which explained why Maya's school nurse had seen a 40% increase in asthma inhaler requests from Zone B students over 3 years. He visited 31 of the 73 families on his days off, sitting in kitchens that looked like his own, recording testimonies on a phone with a cracked screen. Mrs. Williams in 3F had called about her ceiling leak 47 times. She kept a notebook. It's her daughter now used an inhaler twice daily. Mr. Okafor in 6A had been told by a maintenance supervisor in writing that if he didn't like the conditions, he was welcome to find somewhere else to live. He'd kept the email. Every story was different. Every story was the same. In week 4, Principal Diane Foster called Marcus after school hours. She'd watched Maya's class get relocated to trailers. She'd watched Zone A students walk past those trailers every morning on their way to the main building. She'd watched and said nothing for 11 days, and on the 12th day, she couldn't carry the silence anymore. I know a lawyer, Mr. Cole. Her name is Claudia Reeves. She handles fair housing cases pro bono. I think you should call her. Claudia Reeves operated from a 2-room office above a barber shop on Martin Luther King Boulevard. The kind of address that told you everything about who she served and nothing about what she was capable of. She was 44, precise, and had won 3 federal housing cases in 5 years on a budget that wouldn't cover Victoria Ashford's monthly flower arrangements. Marcus sat across from her desk and placed Rosa's folder between them. Claudia opened it. She read for 45 minutes without speaking. Marcus watched her eyes move across pages the way his used to move across building plans, scanning for the structural failure that would bring everything down. When she finally looked up, her voice was quiet but carried the kind of certainty that comes from understanding exactly what you're holding. This isn't a tenant complaint, Marcus. This documentation, the dispatch logs, the response time differentials, the violation cataloging. This is a professional inspection report. IRC Section R402, NFPA 101, HUD Habitability Standards. Lead paint disclosures under federal statute. You didn't compile this as a janitor. Marcus reached into his wallet and placed a worn card on her desk. State of New Jersey, Department of Community Affairs. Housing Inspector License. Hashtag HI-2019-4471. Marcus D. Cole. Before my wife got sick, I was lead code enforcement officer for the city of Newark. 4 years, 600 buildings inspected. I know every code, every violation category, every federal reporting threshold by memory. After Denise died, I stopped functioning. Lost the position, lost our apartment, ended up cleaning floors at the same company that was violating everything I used to enforce. Claudia sat back in her chair. And the pieces were assembling themselves into something she recognized from years of fighting systems designed to be unassailable. You've been inside their buildings every night for 8 months. You've documented violations they don't even know exist in their own files. I know exactly what they have, and I know what it means under federal law. Something shifted in Claudia's expression. The kind of shift that happens when a lawyer stops seeing a case and starts seeing a cause. Marcus, this isn't state level. The pattern, the duration, the number of families affected. This goes to the Federal Housing Commission. We file under 42 U.S.C. Section 3604 and Section 3617. Discriminatory terms and conditions, plus interference with housing rights. How long to prepare? 6 weeks if we work fast. I need you to cross-reference Rosa's dispatch data with census demographics for every building. I need the violation photographs organized by code category. And I need you to keep working at Ashford until we file. Keep mopping their floors. Keep mopping their floors while we build the case that pulls those floors out from under them. Marcus nodded. For the first time in 3 years, the distance between who he was and who he appeared to be felt like an advantage instead of a wound. But machines that run for 30 years develop immune systems. On a Thursday afternoon in week 7, James Whitfield walked into the security office and reviewed camera footage from the executive floor. What he found was a custodial technician named Marcus Cole entering the conference room at 11:47 p.m., pausing over the blueprint table for 19 seconds longer than trash removal required, then visiting the dispatch office at 12:03 a.m., where he spent 4 minutes in conversation with Rosa Gutierrez. Whitfield called Victoria from his car. "The janitor from 4B. He's been photographing our buildings, maintenance areas, blueprint rooms, dispatch records. He's been doing it for weeks." The line was quiet for 3 seconds. When Victoria spoke, her voice carried no hesitation. "Terminate him, unauthorized access to proprietary company materials, and start the eviction process on 4B, lease violation, Section 12, Paragraph 4. 2 envelopes arrived at Unit 4B on the same day. Marcus opened them at the kitchen table while Maya was at school. Termination of employment, effective immediately. Notice to vacate, 30 days. And the apartment was silent except for the radiator, still banging, still unfixed, 78 days after the original request. His phone rang. Rosa, calling from a gas station payphone because she no longer trusted her cell. Her voice was a wire pulled tight enough to sing. "Marcus, Whitfield ordered a full purge. All maintenance logs before 2020, scheduled for destruction by end of week. If those records disappear, the dispatch data in my folder becomes uncorroborated. You need to file now." Marcus called Claudia. Emergency injunction against the eviction, filed under federal whistleblower protections. The motion hit the court docket by 4 p.m., but the clock was now running in two directions. 18 days until the hearing Claudia had petitioned for, yes, and 7 days until Whitfield's purge erased the digital trail that connected Rosa's paper records to the company's own servers. That night, Marcus sat beside Maya's bed. She was reading her volcano book again, tracing the diagram of magma chambers with one finger. Boxes lined the hallway, half-packed, because even with an injunction, there were no guarantees. "Daddy, are we going to have to move again?" "Maybe, but wherever we go with our heads up." Maya closed her book and looked at him with the directness that children possess before the world teaches them to look away. "Are you scared?" "A little." She reached over and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his with a grip that exceeded her size. "That's okay. You told me brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the thing anyway." Marcus stared at his daughter. She had handed him back his own words, reforged into something stronger by passing through a 7-year-old's unbreakable belief that her father meant what he wrote on napkins. He kissed her forehead and held the moment the way you hold something you know you'll need to remember when the room gets dark. After she fell asleep, he sat at the kitchen table. The folder was open. 247 pages, 73 families, 6 years of buried complaints, 8 months of photographs, 31 recorded testimonies, and 1 inspector's license that the most powerful property company in 3 states didn't know existed. He had 18 days, no job, no savings, a daughter asleep in a building that might not be theirs by month's end, and a hearing that would either validate every sacrifice or prove that the system was exactly as unbreakable as it was designed to be. Marcus closed the folder, placed both hands flat on the table, and sat in the silence of a kitchen where the radiator still banged because no one had come to fix it in 80 days. Tomorrow he would start preparing his testimony. Tomorrow he would organize the evidence into the sequence Claudia had mapped. Tomorrow he would rehearse speaking to federal commissioners who would see a janitor and need to be shown an inspector. But tonight, he was just a father sitting in a kitchen that might not be his for much longer, listening to his daughter breathe through a wall thin enough to hear her turn in her sleep, carrying the kind of weight that doesn't show on a body but reshapes the bones underneath. And in 18 days, everything would change, or nothing would. And the distance between those two outcomes was exactly the width of one folder, held together by the hands of a man the world had trained itself not to see. The night before the hearing, Victoria Ashford sat alone in her home office and read 31 testimonies for the first time. Not the statistical summaries her legal team had prepared, not the risk assessment briefs with their calculated exposure estimates and settlement projections. The actual words of actual people delivered to her by courier that afternoon as part of the Commission's mandatory disclosure process. Mrs. Williams, Unit 3F. I called 47 times about the leak above my daughter's bed. My girl sleeps with an inhaler now. She's 9. Mr. Okafor, Unit 6A. They told me in writing that if I didn't like it, I could leave. I've lived here 11 years. My wife died in that apartment. Where exactly am I supposed to go? Denise Morales, Unit 5. D. My son asked me why our hallway smells like something rotten and his friend's hallway in Building A smells like paint. I didn't know what to tell him. He's 6. Victoria read all 31. Then she closed the file, poured a glass of water she didn't drink, and stared at the portrait of Gerald Ashford hanging above her desk. Her father's face offered what it had always offered, confidence without apology, certainty without cost. She had inherited his company, his buildings, his priority matrix, and his gift for looking at numbers instead of names. She picked up her phone and called her lead attorney, where I want to see every maintenance dispatch log from the last 6 years, not the summaries, the originals. Victoria, the hearing is in 12 hours. This is not the time to get me the logs. They arrived by email at 2 a.m. She opened them on her laptop and scrolled through 6 years of color-coded data that told a story her quarterly reports had been designed to hide: blue and orange, 2.3 and 5.1. Buildings A through F. The pattern was so clean it could have been drawn with a ruler, because it had been, by her father in 1994, refined by Whitfield in 2019, and maintained by her every single quarter she had chosen to approve the operating budget without asking what priority scheduling actually meant. She closed the laptop at 3:47 a.m. and did not sleep. 18 days after he lost his job and nearly lost his home, Marcus Cole walked into the Federal Housing Commission hearing room wearing the same borrowed suit from the morning this story began. The folder under his arm contained the same 247 pages. His hands carried the same steadiness, but the man inside the suit had traveled a distance that couldn't be measured in days. The room was full. Press in the gallery. Rosa Gutierrez in the third row, her pension-earning hands folded in her lap, her presence a statement louder than testimony. Principal Diane Foster beside her. Claudia Reeves at the plaintiff's table, having filed every motion and prepared every exhibit, but understanding that this case would be won or lost by the man sitting next to her. Victoria Ashford entered with her 4 attorneys and took her seat at the defense table. She did not look at Marcus. She looked at the commissioners the way a woman looks at a mirror when she already knows what it will show. Commissioner Aldridge called the hearing to order. Claudia delivered a brief legal framework, citing 42 U.S.C. Section 3604 and Section 3617, establishing jurisdiction, and then yielded the floor to Marcus. He stood. The gallery shifted. A janitor at a federal hearing was unusual. A janitor who began speaking with the vocabulary of a building inspector was something else entirely. Marcus presented the evidence without raising his voice. Dispatch records showing the 2.3 to 5.1 day disparity across racial lines. Rosa's documentation linking the pattern to Ashford's internal priority matrix software. Photographs of 14 units with active health hazards, categorized by federal code. Lead paint violations under 42 U.S.C. Section 4852D, and fire escape failures under NFPA 101. Mold concentrations exceeding EPA residential thresholds in buildings where children slept every night. Financial records showing $2.1 million in deferred maintenance allocated to predominantly minority-occupied buildings versus $180,000 deferred in white-occupied properties over the same period. He presented 31 tenant testimonies. He named each family. He gave their unit numbers, their years of occupancy, their number of filed complaints, and the number of times those complaints had been classified as recurring nuisance and buried by Ashford's Human Resources Department. Victoria's lead attorney rose. Commissioners, with respect, Mr. Cole is a former custodial employee with a personal grievance. He has no professional standing to... Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and placed a card on the table. State of New Jersey Housing Inspector License, number H-2019-4471. I inspected over 600 buildings in 4 years for the city of Newark. I know the difference between neglect and policy. What Ashford Property Group operates is not neglect. It is a system designed in 1994 by Gerald Ashford, maintained for 30 years, and administered by the current CEO who approved its operating budget every quarter for 6 consecutive years. 73 families filed complaints. Everyone was silenced. Those families were not nuisances, commissioners. They were people asking for the same dignity that their neighbors received automatically. The gallery held its breath. Rosa Gutierrez pressed her hands tighter together. Claudia Reeves kept her eyes on the commissioners. Victoria Ashford stared at the surface of the defense table as though reading something written there that only she could see. Her lead attorney leaned in, whispering with the urgency of a man who understood that the structural integrity of a $340 million company was now measured in seconds. Victoria listened. Then she stopped listening. She placed her hand on his arm, the way you place your hand on a door you've decided to walk through, and she stood, the room recalibrated. He's right. Her attorneys erupted. Victoria raised one hand, and the eruption died. My father designed that system. I inherited it. 6 years ago, I reviewed the maintenance data and saw exactly what Mr. Cole has presented today. And I was told by counsel that restructuring would cost $12 million and expose the company to liability. I chose the math over the people. I approved the budgets. I let the matrix run. And I am responsible for every day those 73 families waited for repairs that came 2.5 days late, every single time, because of where they lived and who they were. She looked at Marcus for the first time since entering the room, not with the gaze of a CEO assessing a threat, but with the unprotected expression of a person who has just stopped pretending. I'm sorry, not as strategy, as someone who knew and did nothing. Marcus met her eyes. He nodded once. The gesture carried no triumph, no vindication, no satisfaction. It carried acknowledgement, which was heavier than all of those things combined. Because acknowledgement means you saw the person across from you as fully human at the exact moment they stopped hiding. The consequences arrived with the efficiency of machinery that had been waiting to move. James Whitfield was arrested outside the hearing room on federal charges of evidence destruction and conspiracy to violate the Fair Housing Act, the maintenance log purge he'd ordered traced to his direct authorization. He faced 8 to 15 years. Rosa Gutierrez received federal whistleblower protection, her pension secured by statute. Her 22 years of silent record-keeping entered into the Commission's permanent file as the foundational evidence of the case. Victoria Ashford stepped down as CEO voluntarily and established a $14.2 million remediation fund for affected tenants. Her cooperation with the subsequent DOJ investigation, which expanded to cover all 4,200 Ashford units across 3 states, was noted by the Commission as a mitigating factor. CNN carried the story that evening. The Chiron read, DOJ opens investigation into Ashford Property Group. 3 states, 4,200 units, 30-year pattern. Local news interviewed families outside Ridgewood Apartments. Mr. Okafor stood on the steps of Building B, tears running into his collar, holding the same email that had told him to leave if he didn't like it. Someone finally listened. He managed, and then couldn't manage anything else. 14 property management companies across the Northeast announced voluntary audits of their maintenance systems within the following month. The Priority Matrix became a case study in fair housing training programs nationwide. 6 months later, the radiator in Unit 4B was silent. Not because it had been ignored into submission, but because it had been replaced, along with every other deferred repair in buildings B, D, and F, funded by the remediation initiative that now bore the name of the man who had mopped the floors of the company that owned them. Marcus Cole stood in his kitchen on a Tuesday morning wearing a dress shirt instead of a uniform. His new identification badge read, Director of Compliance and Safety, Ashford Remediation Initiative. He'd accepted the position on one condition, that he reported directly to the Federal Monitor, not to any Ashford executive. The condition was granted without negotiation. Maya's science fair trophy sat on the kitchen table. First place. The effects of indoor mold on respiratory health in children. A study of Ridgewood Apartments, Zone B. She had turned their suffering into data, and their data into knowledge, and their knowledge into a volcano made of facts that no one could dismiss as a recurring nuisance. She appeared at 8 o'clock. Backpack, gap-toothed grin, the same weather pattern entrance she'd always made. Daddy, Mrs. Patterson upstairs told me to say thank you. She said her heat works better now too because you fixed everything for everyone, not just us. Marcus poured her juice. That's the whole point, baby. When you fix things right, everybody benefits. Even the people who were mean? Even them. Dignity isn't something you take from others to keep for yourself. It's something you build until there's enough for everyone to stand on. Maya considered this with the gravity of a child who had learned, at 7, that the world contained systems designed to make people like her invisible, and that visibility was something you sometimes had to build with your own hands. Daddy? Yeah, baby. When I grow up, I want to fix things too. Marcus set down the juice, pulled his daughter close. Over her head, on the shelf by the window, Denise's photograph caught the morning light. The coffee mug still sat on the counter, empty, where he placed it every morning out of a habit he'd stopped wanting to break. Love doesn't end. It just changes what it asks of you. He walked Maya to school at 8:15. The building's front railing was new. The buzzer worked. The hallway light no longer flickered. And across the street, a woman was stepping out of a modest sedan, dressed for work at the community center where she now taught financial literacy workshops to tenants who had once been her revenue line items. Victoria saw Marcus. He saw her. She nodded. He nodded back. Not friendship. Not yet. But the particular respect that exists between people who have seen each other at their worst and chosen to believe the other could be better. Marcus and Maya walked toward the school, her hand in his, the morning warm on their faces. The system hadn't been dismantled. 850 families across 3 states still had claims pending. There were hearings ahead, depositions, reforms that would take years to implement and decades to measure. The work was not finished. The work, if he was honest, would never be finished. But 73 families had been heard. One man had refused to be invisible. And one 7-year-old girl had learned that justice isn't the loudest voice in the room. It's the steadiest. It shows up. It documents. It remembers. And when the time comes, it speaks with the calm of someone who knows that the truth doesn't need volume. It just needs someone willing to carry it into the room and set it on the table. Maya looked up at him. Daddy, your folder is famous now. Marcus laughed. A real one. The first one in a long time that didn't cost him anything. It's not the folder, baby. It's what was inside it. The evidence? The people. It was always the people. They walked into the morning. 2 figures against the light, 1 story among 73, and a building behind them that finally, After 80 days and one federal hearing and 247 pages, worked the way it was supposed to for everyone who lived inside it.